Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. I can hear you. I'm not sure who is speaking.
I'm sorry. This is Tara, the court reporter.
And can you pronounce, Tara, will you please pronounce your last name for me?
Yes, it's Golino.
Golino, Ms. Golino, yes. Which we're all going by last names today. So Ms. Golino,
okay.
Thank you for joining us. And I'll just comment up front, if at any point during this process we go too quickly, the parties talk too quickly, you need a spelling of a name, anything like that, please don't hesitate to speak up and let me know.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And we're just going to wait for the rest of the participants. I'll wait just a few more seconds to make sure everyone has entered the room and to give you a chance to check your audio and your visual before we get started this morning.
Okay, thank you.
This is Matt Zadar. Just wanted to test our audio here in our conference room. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Mr. Zadar. I hear you just fine.
Excellent. Thank you.
And that's a lovely backdrop you have there too.
Sticking with the agricultural.
It looks like we have everyone into the room, so I'm going to formally go ahead and get started. We will go through roll call, so we'll make sure that we can hear from each of you as we go through that process. But I'll get started. Good morning. I am Hearing Officer Nicole Kinsey with the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is the hearing on the pending application of the County of San Joaquin, application 29657, for a permit to appropriate water from the South Fork American River by diversion at the Freeport Regional Water Authority facility located on the Sacramento River. This hearing is being held in accordance with the notice of public hearing dated June 10th, 2021, and the amended notice of public hearing dated July 22nd, 2021. The June 10th notice of public hearing identifies the hearing issues for this hearing today. This hearing is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is also being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video are being recorded, and we will post files of this recording and the Zoom generated transcript to the AHO FTP site. The YouTube recording will also be available on the AHO YouTube webpage. If you are experiencing technical difficulties trying to communicate with us today, which sometimes happens, please send an email to the AHO at admin@hrgoffice@waterboards.ca.gov. We will have AHO staff monitoring the email inbox, and they can let me know that you are having trouble contacting us through the Zoom. We do have a court reporter today. I thought I'd mention it up front. Ms. Galina has joined us, who I understand was reserved by San Joaquin County. There is contact information for the court reporter in the administrative record located on our FTP site, and it is found in an email from San Joaquin County to the AHO dated September 23rd, 2021. So you can find that contact information there. If there are any interested parties who would like to coordinate to obtain a transcript, please contact the court reporter or San Joaquin County directly if you would like to do that. Also, please keep in mind, we do have a court reporter, and for the sake of Ms. Galina, as for all the witnesses who are testifying and the attorneys, if you can try to, especially if you're speaking from a script, try not to move too quickly so that the words can be accurately captured in the transcript. Assisting me today are several staff of the Administrative Hearings Office. We have Nicole Mullen, Amy Blunk, Skylar Anderson, and Kyle Woldridge. And Ms. Mullen will be handling the screen sharing of exhibits today and moving along slides for our witnesses who have PowerPoint presentations. So if you're a witness, you may simply ask Ms. Mullen to advance to the next slide. She'll pull up your presentation, and you can ask her to advance to the next slide when you're ready during your testimony. And attorneys, if you need a particular exhibit pulled up, please go ahead and ask Ms. Mullen directly to bring up that particular exhibit. If at any time today I am experiencing technical difficulties, which has happened on at least one occasion, and I'm not able to rejoin the Zoom conference within just a few minutes, One of my staff will call a brief recess until I am able to rejoin you. We will take breaks today. We will have approximately a mid-morning break and then a lunch and so forth. But if any of you need a break at any other time, please just let me know at an appropriate time and we can go ahead and do that. And then just for your planning purposes, I do plan on holding this hearing to a hard stop by 5 p.m. today. So we'll wrap up at a convenient breaking point before then. At this time, I'd like to move to appearances. To do that, I will identify each of the entities that filed NOIs and who plan to participate today by either presenting a case in chief or by cross-examination. If you are representing that entity today, please unmute your microphone and identify yourself. And also please spell your name for the court reporter. I think that would be quite helpful. And then once we get through the parties who plan to participate by case in chief or by cross, then I'll move to the parties who are planning to participate by policy statements only. Okay, so we'll move in order there. So let's go ahead and get started with San Joaquin County and Ms. Brenner.
Good morning. Barbara Brenner on behalf of San Joaquin County, and with me today is Rich Buckman, as well as Matt Sadar and Karen Burke.
Thank you, Ms. Brenner. And just for the sake of the court reporter, would you mind having each of the folks that you introduced spell at least the last name?
Sure. My last name is B-R-E-N-N-E-R.
Zadar is Z-I-D-A-R.
And Buckman is B-U-C-H-M-A-N.
Burke is V as in Victor, I-R-K.
Wonderful. Thank you very much and good morning. Freeport Regional Water Authority.
Janice Snyder, J-A-N-I-C-E-S-N-Y-D-E-R for Freeport Regional Water Authority, and I have David Briggs and Forrest Williams with me today.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. And Mr. Briggs and Mr. Williams, I believe you will be testifying witnesses today, so I'll ask you to spell your names when you come up to testify with us. Sacramento County Water Agency.
Good morning, Aaron Ferguson for Sacramento County Water Agency. Last name is F-E-R-G-U-S-O-N. And then I have Carrie Schmitz from the Water Agency here as well.
Thank you. And as I understand, Ms. Schmitz is also a witness today, so we can have her introduce herself at that time. So thank you very much and good morning.
Morning.
California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Good morning, Jessica Schroeder for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Last name is spelled S-C-H-R-O-E-D-E-R. And I also have Colin Purdy with me who will be testifying later today. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning, Ms. Schroeder. Friends of the River.
Ronald Stork, S-T-O-R-K.
Good morning, Mr. Stork. El Dorado Water Agency.
Good morning, Austin Cho. It's last name C-H-O here for El Dorado Water Agency.
Thank you and good morning, Mr. Cho. El Dorado Irrigation District.
Good morning, Hearing Officer Kenzie, Brian Polson for El Dorado Irrigation District.
And Mr. Polson, just to help us out, will you please spell your last name, just for the record?
P-O-U-L-S-E-N.
Thank you and good morning. San Juan Water District.
Sorry, had an issue unmuting my microphone. This is Janelle Kradiger on behalf of San Juan Water District. I will also be joined by my colleague Elizabeth Evans, but I understand she's having some difficulties signing on.
I understand. Well, thank you, Ms. Kradiger. Would you please, just for the record, spell your last name and then the last name of your colleague, if you will?
Sure. So my last name is Kradiger, K-R-A-T-T-I-G-E-R, and Ms. Evans is E-W-E-N-S.
I went to law school with a couple of these people.
Oh, yeah.
And just so you know, I heard some background comments, so someone may not be on mute. If you don't want to be heard, you're not on mute. And thank you, and Ms. Kradiger, good morning. Placer County Water Agency. Do I have Mr. Kelly or another representative from Placer County? Then moving on to Westlands Water District.
Good morning. This is Rebecca Aykroyd. I'm not appearing for Westlands, but I did want to pass on a message from John Rubin
Please.
that a pressing matter arose requiring his attention, and he does plan on joining as soon as he can.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Aykroyd. And I believe I have you next for the San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority.
Rebecca Aykroyd, last name Akroyd. And then also my colleague, Carissa Beecham is on.
Good morning, Carissa Beecham, that's CARISSABEECHAM.
Thank you and good morning.
Good morning.
Glen Colusa Irrigation District.
Morning, Aaron Ferguson for Glen Close Irrigation District.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. State Water Contractors and Kern County Water Agency.
Good morning, Kira Johnson for State Water Contractors and Kern County Water Agency. I will be joined as he's available by my colleague, Joseph Byrne today as well. My last name Johnson is JOHNSON and Joe's last name Byrne is BYRNE.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Good morning. And then California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance.
Good morning, Chris Schutz for the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance, SHUTES.
Thank you, Mr. Schutz. Did I miss anyone on this list who is planning to either present a case in chief or participate by cross-examination today?
Good morning, Hearing Officer Kinsey. This is Wes Miliband for the City of Sacramento. We are not presenting a case in chief, but I would like to reserve the potential opportunity for cross-examination, if that is agreeable to you.
That is fine, Mr. Miliband. Remind me if I don't call you on cross just because I may not have made it into my script. Don't hesitate to speak up, please. So
I appreciate it. And I also have my colleague here with me, Christopher Strauss. The spelling of our names, Wes is W-E-S, last name Miliband, and like Mike, I-L-I-B-A-N-D. Christopher is K-R-I-S-T-O-P-H-E-R. Strauss, S is in Sam, T-R-O-U-S-E.
Thank you, Mr. Miliband.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who I did not read off the list who is planning to present a case in chief or participate by cross-examination?
Good morning, Ms. Kinsey. This is Eric Soderlund, last name S-O-D-E-R-L-U-N-D, on behalf of the Department of Water Resources. If you're amenable, I'd also like to reserve the right to cross-examine.
That's fine with me, Mr. Soderlund, and the same warning applies, which I may not, because I don't have you DWR worked into the script. If I miss you, please don't hesitate to speak up if you have questions for the witnesses. Thank you. Is there anyone else? I'm now going to move to the entities who plan on presenting a policy statement today, orally, who plan on presenting an oral policy statement. And I'll move through my list. So I have the City of Stockton. Do I have a representative from the City of Stockton today?
Good morning. My name is Mel Lytle, M-E-L-L-Y-T-L-E. I'll be representing the City of Stockton.
Thank you. And is it, I think I have it in my notes, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Dr. Lytle? Is that appropriate, or is it Mr. Lytle?
Dr. Lytle, correct.
Dr. Lytle. That's what I recall. Thank you and good morning, Dr. Lytle.
Thank you.
North San Joaquin Water Conservation District. Contra Costa Water District.
Good morning. This is Morgan Biggerstaff. Biggerstaff, appearing for Contra Costa Water District and on behalf of Douglas E. Cody.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Biggerstaff. City of Folsom, City of Roseville, Sacramento Suburban Water District, Woodland and Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency.
Good morning, Officer Quincy. This is Holly Jacobson, Jacobson, the City of Folsom, City of Roseville, Sacramento Suburban Water District, Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency. However, we don't intend to present oral policy statements. We submitted written only.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Good morning, and thank you very much. And then next on my list, I have City of Sacramento. So I'll just ask, since we're here, I know you're present, Mr. Miliband, but are you planning on presenting an oral policy statement today as well? Did you may have already said that to me. Just to confirm.
No, I did not. Thank you, hearing officer. And the answer is no, I'm not planning to make an oral remark. I would just submit for the record that we do have a joint letter that was submitted late yesterday afternoon.
Yes, thank you. And I saw that letter come in. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then next on my list, I have the Bureau of Reclamation, although I've noted that the intent is a written policy statement only. But do I have Ms. Holm with us today on the Zoom call?
Yes. And you're correct. We are just going to limit it to the written.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Ms. Holm.
Good morning.
And Save the American River, Mr. McDonald.
Yeah, we're here. We're going to do a statement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stockton East Water District. And then finally, we received a written statement from Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Authority. I wanted to see if we have a representative and if there's an intent to also make an oral statement. Is there anyone else who I have not already called upon and who has not already identified themselves who plans to present an oral policy statement this morning or otherwise participate in the hearing other than our witnesses, of course? Did I miss anyone on the Zoom call?
Hearing Officer Kunze, this is Dan Kelly, Placer County Water Agency. Apologize for being a few minutes late. We do not have an oral policy statement, but I am appearing on behalf of the agency.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. And my understanding is that you're appearing on behalf of the agency who may participate in cross-examination.
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who I've missed who is now on the call? All right, great. What I would like to do is then go ahead and start with our policy statements. Just a reminder that the policy statements are non-evidentiary statements and they should be limited to 5 minutes or less. I'd like to start by hearing the policy statements or opening statements, depending on how you want to style it, from the parties who are participating by cross-examination only. And then after that, I'll move to those who are participating by policy statement only. So first, I'm looking at my list. Excuse me, my paper's out of order. I'm looking to El Dorado Water Agency. Do you have any policy or opening statement that you'd like to make this morning?
This time, Ms. Hearing Officer.
Thank you. And I'm just going through the list. There's just so many parties, it's easier for me to just check down the list. So it's perfectly fine if you have nothing to say. That's also appreciated. El Dorado Irrigation District.
No opening statement at this time. Thanks very much.
Thank you. San Juan Water District.
No opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Kelly, I think you just said to me that you did not have a plan to make a policy statement or opening statement. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rubin, have you joined us for Westlands Water District? Not yet, and we can return to them. Ms. Aykroyd, does San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority have a policy statement or opening statement this morning?
No, we do not, but we would refer to the written statement that was filed last night.
Thank you very much. Glen Colusa Irrigation District, Mr. Ferguson.
No opening statement, though Clusa did join in the policy statement that was submitted last night as well.
Thank you. State Water Contractors and Kern County Water Agency.
My clients are also 2 of the 10 parties that joined in that joint statement that was filed last night, and we'll let it speak for itself. And I do want to note that while we reserve the right to participate in cross-examination, I don't anticipate that we will unless something comes up that we're not expecting.
Okay, thank you very much. And then CSPA, Mr. Schutz, do you have an opening statement or policy statement this morning?
I do.
Wonderful. You may have the floor.
Good morning, Chris Schutz, water rights advocate for the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance, otherwise known as CSPA or CSPA. After carefully reading the testimony and after review of the record, I am convinced that the Administrative Hearings Office must recommend that the Water Board cancel application 29657. San Joaquin County has made no substantive progress on the application since its 4th amended application in 2014. It has made no procedural progress since 2014 either. Indeed, there is not a single document in the administrative record since the 4th amended application. CSPA last heard from the applicant on this application in 2012. After 30 years, the applicant has not defined a project. The best the applicant can do in its testimony in 2021 is list a series of potential projects that the application might serve. The applicant's witnesses excuse the delay by stating that the applicant has prioritized more cost-effective projects in preference to application 29657. Many of those projects use or propose to use the same infrastructure that the applicant cites as potential infrastructure for use under application 29657. Yet funding is not complete for such more effective, cost-effective projects. Even North San Joaquin Water Conservation District's existing permit for a very modest 20,000 acre-feet per year in wetter water years only. Not having a defined project, the applicant also has no stated cost estimates for a project. But whatever the project may eventually be, one of the applicant's witnesses frankly admits that water sourced in the American River, as contemplated in the application, is not cost effective. Instead, the witness spins American River water as something to meet long-term needs and future uses. It is not included as a planned project, defined by the witness as a project to be completed and online before 2040. Maintaining a priority date for half a century, 1990 to 2040, and beyond, before a project becomes affordable, is the very definition of cold storage of a water rights application. All environmental review cited by the applicant is programmatic review for a suite of potential projects. None is specific to application 29657. For decades, San Joaquin County has cited the long past water rights decisions and orders that mentioned potential alternatives for the county while denying the county's applications at hand. These potential alternatives were nothing more than that. The county should stop acting like these mentioned alternatives have substance and should abandon these distractions and pursue projects it can design, review, fund, and complete in reasonable time. Meanwhile, the State Water Board should cancel application 29657. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schutz. At this point, I'm going to move to the other entities who plan to participate by policy statements only. I will first turn to the City of Stockton and Dr. Lytle. At this time, you may present your policy statement, please.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dr. Mel Lytle. I'm the Director of Municipal Utilities for the City of Stockton. I provide these comments today at the direction of the Stockton City Manager, Mr. Harry Black, based on the City Council's official state platform and on behalf of the city's 315,000 residents to voice support for San Joaquin County's continued advancement of the American River Water Right Application 29657. The well-being of the city, its residents, and its economy is inextricably linked to a secure and reliable water supply that protects the health and safety of our community. A new supply conveniently served from the American River watershed under application 29657 could help meet current and future beneficial use demands, relieve critical groundwater overdraft, increase drought resiliency, reduce the potential impacts of climate change, and support our local disadvantaged and environmental justice communities. The City of Stockton, the California Water Service Company, and San Joaquin County, collectively referred to as the urban contractors, have collaborated for decades to cooperatively develop and manage local water resources in the area. As the agencies responsible for Stockton's retail water utility services, the urban contractors must maintain a secure and reliable water supply to meet customer demands. Current local water supply contracts have fixed durations. Historic surface water supply sources may not be as reliable as once thought due to the impacts of climate change and new flow requirements needed to meet delta habitat and water quality standards. As a result, new water supply resource initiatives must continue to be developed, permitted, financed, constructed, and put to beneficial use. An example of such an initiative is the city's Delta Water Supply Project. May 12th, 2022 marks the project's 10th anniversary in operation. At a cost of $223 million, the majority of it supported by ratepayer capital, it was the largest public works project in the city's history. Based on the new water right 21167 and permitted under Water Code Section 1485, the completed project included an 80 million gallon per day Delta intake pump station on Empire Tract with state-of-the-art fish screens, 13 miles of 54-inch raw water pipeline, and a 30 million gallon per day advanced water treatment plant with ozone pretreatment, floc-sed, and membrane microfiltration processes. To date, the project has produced over 53 billion gallons of drinking water for our community since its dedication. At present, the urban contractors have entered into discussions to develop an agreement to cooperate, in which the urban contractors have indicated their intent to jointly and efficiently focus their efforts to develop a new project plan and environmental review for the American River water through a formal partnership agreement. It is of critical importance that the proposed actions of the urban contractors proceed under the agreement for our community to maintain and secure water supplies given our uncertain future. The further development of this application is directly applicable and supportive of the urban contractor's objective. The City of Stockton supports San Joaquin County's continued development of American River Water Right Application 29657 as part of these joint efforts going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lytle. Next on my list, I'll look to Contra Costa Water District and Mr. Biggerstaff. If you would like to make your oral policy statement at this time.
We have no oral policy statement to make. However, we would like to note we are also a signatory to that joint statement that was filed yesterday evening.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that note. Then I'll look to Save the American River Association, Mr. McDonald, if you would like to make your policy statement at this time.
Yes, thank you. My name is Clyde McDonald. I represent Save the American River Association. Our interest is in protecting the American River Parkway, one of the best urban river parkways in the Western United States. The parkway gets more annual visitation than Yosemite. My presentation will summarize our policy paper, which is about due diligence, which is the subject of this hearing. San Joaquin is proposing to use the Freeport diversion project, a project that cost almost $1 billion. The partnership agreement between the two partners, EB-MUD and Sacramento County Water Agency, specifies that a third party may not use the Freeport project if one of the partners would be harmed. As a result, San Joaquin needs to resolve Sacramento County Water Agency's concerns. San Joaquin has had only one meeting with the Sacramento County Water Agency about a month ago. One meeting a month ago to use $1 billion project is not due diligence. In its conference statement, San Joaquin County said it wants to investigate the use of the Folsom South Canal as the diversion point. This statement is a very clear indication that in 31 years, San Joaquin has not really defined the project. The statement is also a very clear indication that San Joaquin has not done due diligence with Sacramento County and its interests. When EB-MUD proposed a similar project of similar amounts of water to go down the Folsom South Canal, Sacramento interests fought EB-MUD for 30 years. Those discussions were brutal and hostile, and I know because I was in many of those meetings. Because San Joaquin did not meet with my organization, I decided to ask other protestants, parties, and others not with landed interests in San Joaquin County whether San Joaquin had met with them. In some cases, agency statements provided to the AHO included this information. San Joaquin has not met with the following, at least within the memory of those currently responsible for the project: Save the American River Association, my organization, Friends of the River, City of Sacramento, SMUD, Glen Colusa Irrigation District, State Department of Fish and Wildlife, State Water Contractors, Kern County Water Agency, Contra Costa Water District, Wesleyan, City of Folsom, City of Roseville.
Can you slow down, please?
Sorry. Sorry.
Contra Costa Water District.
Where are you?
Contra Costa Water District.
Okay. Westlands, City of Folsom, City of Roseville, San Juan Suburban Water District. San Joaquin, on the other hand, did have one meeting, just one, with Elder Water Agency. There are other organizations that are not protestants or parties that one would reasonably think that San Joaquin should have met with, but has not. San Joaquin has not met with the Sacramento Water Forum, which is the regional water planning organization covering the American River watershed. That was formed in 1993, so there's been plenty of time. San Joaquin has not met with the Regional Water Authority, which represents water agencies in the American River watershed. San Joaquin has not met with Sacramento County Parks, which owns and operates the American River Parkway, which would be adversely affected by the project, whichever diversion point they selected. San Joaquin has stated that it is relying on Water Code Section 11460 in developing its application. Sarah questions whether this reliance is consistent with law based on a 1957 California Attorney General opinion and on a 2006 Judge Roby appellate court decision. As a factual matter, we question whether San Joaquin County is immediately adjacent to the American River watershed as required in 11460. And that's because there's an intervening watershed, the Cosumnes. This issue about 11460 does not need to be decided at this hearing, but if the county is granted more time, it would be appropriate to consider this legal due diligence question. Because Folsom Reservoir is small, Sacramento water purveyors depend on carryover storage in Folsom Reservoir. If San Joaquin had been able to take its 147,000 acre feet in this drought year before it was clear that the snowpack was not producing much water and curtailments had not been implemented, Folsom Reservoir today might be below dead pool. If so, the Sacramento area might be in severe crisis. This example is hypothetical, but it demonstrates a very serious concern of the Sacramento area that San Joaquin hasn't resolved. Conclusion. After 31 years, San Joaquin is still trying to figure out what the project is and where the diversion point should be. For all of the agencies listed above, San Joaquin has held only 2 meetings. This is not due diligence. It's not that San Joaquin has done a bad job of due diligence, it's that they have done almost none at all outside of their home county. We request that the application be canceled. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Is there anyone else who is intending to present an oral policy statement today? Did I miss anyone on my list? Well, we're moving right along. I had originally intended to take a break at this point, but I think we should go ahead and move forward. We've only been in session for 37 minutes. So I'm going to look to San Joaquin County. I think at this time, Ms. Brenner, this would be the appropriate time if you'd like to make an opening statement, and then immediately after we'll call your first witness, please.
Thank you. Hearing officer, I'm just hesitating because Mr. Zadar is left over. He's back. I was going to say let's maybe take a break, but he's back, so we'll go forward. Again, I'll introduce myself. I'm Barbara Brenner, an outside counsel for the County of San Joaquin. With me today is Karen Burke, County Deputy Counsel, Fritz Buckman, Deputy Director of County Public Works, Matt Zadar, County Water Resources Manager. San Joaquin County finds itself back in front of the State Water Board with the possibility of again being denied access to another surface water supply to which the State Water Board directed it. For over 50 years, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and the Water Board have denied the county access to its local water supplies as set forth in our written testimony that won't be summarized here today. Water Board Decision 1356, issued in 1970, confirmed the county meets the criteria for watershed protection priority and is not an issue in this proceeding. In 2008, the Water Board issued Order 2008-0045, effectively bringing to a close the Auburn Dam. But relevant to this proceeding, the board also affirmed that there's a public interest in supporting efforts by the county to obtain adequate surface water supplies. The county's application 29657 should be supported by the State Water Board, and the board should allow the county to pursue this application as planned for in the county's integrated regional water management plan, groundwater sustainability plan, demonstration recharge, extraction, and aquifer management project, and other planning efforts outlined in the county testimony that will be summarized this morning. I also want to note that at this juncture, the planning horizon for long-term water supply projects, such as the conjunctive use program specified in the 4th amended application, has increased. Developing these kind of projects is more complex. It requires lengthy collaborative efforts as well as financial arrangements. These large projects are not easy to put together. The 2 witnesses for the county will summarize their testimony today, establishing San Joaquin County's due diligence relative to application 29657. Mr. Zadar will walk through the extensive planning undertaken since the amended application was filed in 2014, as well as the background and foundational planning efforts to put the water subject to application 29657 to beneficial use leading up to the amended application. Mr. Buckman will summarize his testimony that is focused on San Joaquin County's Sustainable Groundwater Management Act compliance efforts and how these efforts relate to the development of and highlight the need for application 29657. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Zadar. like anything prior to that.
I will look to Mr. Zadar. Before Mr. Zadar testifies, I will be administering the oath. So I'm scanning my many screens to see if I can find Mr. Zadar on screen. So give me just a moment here.
I'm here somewhere.
Oh, I see you there in front of your lovely backdrop. Mr. Zadar, if you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you very much. You may proceed with your testimony.
Could you bring up the presentation, please?
Yes, Ms. Mullen, if you please, I believe it's San Joaquin County Exhibit 14.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
And if you would open the slideshow part of it.
Yes.
Keep going. Up to the left.
Almost.
Above there, up above design. See a little. You can also do it down the very bottom right. There you go. Thank you. My name is Matt Zadar. I'm the Water Resource Manager for San Joaquin County. I've been doing water resource and groundwater planning, management, engineering for 30 plus years. Hard to believe. Been with the county 2 years. Let's go to the next slide. I'll cover what I'm going to discuss in the presentation. I'll provide some background on the foundational planning efforts we continue to build on. Talk about the good cause of chronic and systematic overdraft that supports the need for this water in the long term. We will discuss the work undertaken since 2014 to design both intra and inter-regional physical facilities and further test and implement the operational concepts. You'll hear me harping on this whole idea of physical facilities and operational concepts and the physical solutions to our overdraft that we need to implement to address this problem. And the state board would need to implement it if they were to get engaged in our groundwater sustainability plan and make judgments there. Emphasis on particular facilities and operational concepts that would make best use of this water, apply it to beneficial use, and hopefully document the continuity in our planning. Looking at these concepts, and they're controversial, they're complicated, especially when you try to do inter and intra regional work like what we have been engaged in with the discussions with East Bay Mud, who is the member of the Freeport and whose capacity we would propose to use. And we'll talk a bit about the progress being made. Next slide, please. The intent of the application is to achieve sustainability and halt overdraft and meet those long-term needs. And I thought Dr. Lytle summed it up very well in terms of the reliability and risks imposed by our current resources. And we do have, or did have, access to the Mobilizing, Calaveras, and the Stanislaus River. And all of our historical documentation there in the administrative record shows we had issues and were bumped off of our watershed of origin rivers on the Stanislaus and the Mobilizing. This water is necessary to meet the current and future beneficial uses and increase that resiliency and reliability of our water supply portfolio consistent with the state water plan and the governor's reliability portfolio efforts and directives to all of us. Throw in drought and climate change, and we've got a whole lot of issues towards ensuring a long-term sustainable water supply and our ability to halt and reduce overdraft. Next slide, please. The foundational documents are really key. We have endeavored in integrated regional water management planning starting in 2007, updating that plan in 2014, where we identified that integrated conjunctive use projects that ultimately were evaluated in a programmatic EIR and explained all the physical facilities and operational concepts to do direct and inlet recharge. We're now looking at flood mar and spreading of flood waters and getting some traction with that concept. That plan was updated in 2019, submitted and accepted by DWR, consistent with the state statutes guiding and their requirements guiding IRWMs. The Freeport and underground storage element were in the fourth amended permit. And again, the intent has been to use the available East Bay Mud Freeport capacity. And we did add the underground storage element to that application, demonstrate our commitment to conjunctive use and those type of wet year, dry year operations, as was recommended in a number of the policy statements by others. We're actively pursuing conjunctive use and regional and interregional partnerships, as demonstrated by the DREAM project, which came out of a memorandum of understanding with East Bay Mud to further demonstrate how that could work with water banking, storage, and wet year, dry year types of operations. This is necessary to really get the buy-in by all of the local partners and the regional partner with East Bay Mud. That was perfected later on by a permit issued under our export ordinance that allowed that project to move forward. We did note that project in the fourth amended permit, saying that work was going to be necessary to define the number of acres that we would need for implementing that project. It moved forward as part of settlement protest dismissal agreements on both the American and Mobilizing River, to which East Bay Mud committed to helping us with Sac County Water Agency to address and resolve their protests. The capacity we would propose to use in Freeport was demonstrating in the report prepared by Ryan, which I was the principal investigator and author on. Saying,
I'm sorry, who? It was,
oh, sorry.
it was authorized by who?
Authored by myself as a principal investigator. It's known
Thank
as
you.
the Rhyme report, which showed there was capacity available to be used by East Bay Mud as the member agency with authority to utilize their capacity. So that's an important document. I'll talk a little bit more about that in rebuttal. But that DREAM project really shows our due diligence in moving forward with complicated types of projects necessary to do the conjunctive use and banking with whatever water is available for recharge. And yes, we are looking at all of our local opportunities, whether it's small watersheds or the other rivers, Calaveras, Mobilizing, Stanislaus, because of the reliability reductions due to meeting other requirements for fish, flow standards in the Delta, and all of those things. We know we need to be able to demonstrate a reliable supply for all of our uses. The other physical facilities, again, you'll see there is continuity, and it's been painted as if this is somehow a negative, but the North San Joaquin Water Conservation District, North and South systems have continuously carried through this planning. Regional conjunctive use projects is defined in the Freeport feasibility. The alternative G2 ponds and projects show up in our groundwater sustainability plan. The Freeport element of the American River, alternative R1B, and our banking project 20 in the GSP show continuity and consistency in trying to move these projects forward. Next slide, please. In terms of the historical timeline, we won't beat up on this. It's in the record. It's in the state board's record. We've talked about being denied access. As our own watersheds of wards, we got put up onto the American River, got put in the place of use for American River waters, and the history of the state board decisions is out there for all to see, as well as the efforts to contract with the Bureau, and contracts were signed locally with the Bureau and then denied in Washington. The state board decision in 1970 approved the USBR's permit, subsequently revoked by the 2008 0045 referenced by Ms. Brenner. They failed the contract with us. The other state board decisions that weighed in, we list them here, and they're in the record for a deep dive for anyone that would care to scrutinize those. Next slide, please. The Groundwater Authority is the group that put together our groundwater sustainability plan. Starting after the passage of the legislation, the dialogue's begun
We formed a joint power authority of 16 entities to continue to move the physical facilities and the operating concepts originally proposed by its predecessor agency, the Groundwater Basin Authority, who did the original IRWP, adopted the programmatic EIR, which again could serve as a basis to it's a little stale and getting a little old at this point, but to tear off of and to update other necessary pieces of that that would support secret determinations by the state board or by the local agencies to move forward with these projects, either at a project or programmatic level. Again, looking at what things are ripe for decision. Next slide, please. Again, the long history of things and how it's connected, it is very complicated. We do have 16 cooks in the kitchen, but they're all like working on the same recipe now as defined by that GSP. Some of those other efforts I wanted to acknowledge, the IRWP, the Integrated Conjunctive Use Program, and PEIR, and all of the other things that are part of this inter-regional work that we've done that we call the ICU program, including things from our partners in Stockton East, North San Joaquin, the Freeport efforts, this More Water, which also represents an intra-regional, where we were really trying to figure out how to solve issues that we have in the upper part of the watershed with Calaveras County, as well as looking outwards to the areas where we said we are pleased and ready to negotiate and have dialogues when things are ripe for decision to move forward and figure out how we can service the broader intra-regional needs, whether that's with East Bay Mud or others that might take advantage of the concepts being tested through the DREAM project, namely groundwater storage and banking, strongly endorsed by DWR and in the governor's resiliency portfolio. We need to and recognize that we need to be a part of that. And the American River water is certainly a key element of that opportunity, not only for us, but for others in the region and intra-regionally, along with all of our other sources. Next slide, please. The Integrated Conjunctive Use Program defines all those opportunities for enhanced conjunctive use, provides for the planned future demand, and you'll note that our demands have decreased through conservation, and our overdraft has also been decreased by the investments, like as mentioned by Dr. Lytle, $230 million for the Delta diversion, the water treatment plants at Stockton East, surface water deliveries in lieu of groundwater pumping at Lodi. A lot of good things have happened to the tune of $750 million or so. So you can't say we've been sitting on our hands not trying to address our primary problem of overdraft. And our work to sustainably manage groundwater, maintain the levels, protect the surface waters where there is surface groundwater interaction, and even the groundwater dependent ecosystems. We're all— I'm
sorry. You really need to slow down, pretty please.
Sorry.
The surface groundwater and action. Is that what you said?
Interaction.
Interaction.
And the groundwater dependent ecosystems are all concerns that we need to address. And again, it complicates the planning. All of these operating concepts and physical facilities have been carried forward and are consistent with the groundwater authority and the GSP objectives. Consistency is key, and that shows the continuity. It's also important to note that an Integrated Conjunctive Use Program was also an element of the East Bay Mud's Water Supply Management Program 2040, which included the San Joaquin potential dry year source of supply through projects like an expanded DREAM concept. Next slide, please. The Freeport Feasibility Study, produced in 2011 and connected to the water availability analysis produced shortly thereafter in 2012, lays out a comprehensive alternatives evaluation and identifies those facilities, physical facilities I referenced previously, alternative G and the alternative R in that report. Again, is carried forward as our Project 20 and the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. Those were the preferred projects. It did contain a preliminary environmental review and a plan for CEQA and NEPA. These did not move forward because there was opportunities locally to invest in the next increment of yield that was the least cost, which is prudent to ratepayers, which we certainly are deferential to. especially in these days and the complexity of getting things passed through Prop 218 and the like. Next slide, please. We talked about the DREAM project, the demonstration recharge extraction aquifer management project. We are in the midst of the proof of the concept. The facilities have been built. We have wells in place. Water has been used in lieu of groundwater pumping, so it has been banked for East Bay Mud's dry year use. It was wet year water for use in the dry years, which is exactly what we need to all over California to solve the problem of drought or climate change, certainly. It's demonstrating the feasibility of this whole operating concept. It is important to getting the local support and using the 1 to 2 million acre feet of available groundwater storage as an asset for the community and for others outside of the direct community in that intra-regional planning mode. We're really working to, the physical engineering is not nearly as hard as say the social engineering and establishing the institutional mechanisms to make this work. This is why the DREAM project has been so key. That is being developed under our export ordinance. A permit was issued to what is called the Eastern Water Alliance, which is North San Joaquin, Stockton East, and Central San Joaquin Water Conservation District to conduct the pilot project with $4 million provided by East Bay Mud. And that was important as part of the settlement agreement, the protest dismissal agreement, excuse me, where we were mutually looking at American River and Moqualamy River supplies. Since we have not had access to all Moqualamy River supplies, that part of the portfolio that involves the American River is critical and key and has been historically recognized by the state board and the Bureau as necessary to meet our long-term needs and beneficial uses. I mentioned the memorandum of understanding that kicked this project off. We hope to operate it and demonstrate the concepts further this winter, coming into November. And I talked about that protest dismissal agreement where East Bay Mud had also agreed to help us with their partner in Freeport. We spent a lot of time with East Bay Mud and talking to them because it's their capacity as a member agency that we're seeking access to. And it demonstrated there is a capacity available in the wet years when East Bay Mud is not using it. I've seen a lot of the policy statements submitted where I think there's some fundamental lack of clarity on the concepts of the wet year water or banking or dry year use by partners that would be engaged in the types of things that we've talked about with Freeport and in our groundwater sustainability plan. Next slide, please. Status of actions, some of the things contained in that table 8 schedule, the 4th amended application where we talked about preparing basin characterization, which was item C in that table. We have developed a detailed hydrogeologic conceptual model to characterize the basin as documented in the GSP. And we did develop a groundwater model, which was item D in that table 8 schedule, which is now available and it's documented the historical overdraft and put out a future baseline. It's currently being updated. We're going to be republishing that and using that information to inform discussions at the GWA regarding a basin accounting framework. So we continue to move forward with groundwater banking concepts and the operating concepts as shown in the DREAM project. And again, starting with those discussions back to the integrated conjunctive use program. We'll look at with and without climate change in the future, and then the benefits and or potential impacts of any of the physical facilities or operating concepts continuously discussed since the integrated conjunctive use program. And we talk about demonstrated due diligence. It's not like we've been sitting on our hands. We're operating a very complex planning environment with up to 16 local partners that are now fully engaged in the Joint Powers Authority to make the tough choices. We're also moving forward. I received statement of qualifications in response to a request for qualification to help us with the funding and financial alternatives evaluation and help in the decision support of the Groundwater Authority to actually hit the gas and come up with long-term viable funding. So, you know, I just want to point all these things out, that engagement with East Bay Mud as the partner whose whose capacity we're seeking to use, who has engaged in the DREAM project, who's looking at helping with resolving protests with Sac County Water Agency per the protest dismissal agreement. We have a lot of the things in place, and to have the rug yanked out from under us at this point on water that we have, through that continuity, always considered available for recharge. Wet year water for above normal and wet years to be banked for use in dry and below normal years. It's exactly what we're trying to get accomplished. Next slide, please. In terms of the planning horizon, the schedule in the Fourth Amendment, this is really key. We said construction of new facilities would occur between 2019 and 2030. We continue to move forward with that kind of an aggressive schedule. Might not look aggressive, but anybody that's done this long range planning and built capital facilities knows it takes a long time to get the alignment, the funding, and the financing together for these complex types of agreements. Like I said, the physical facilities and the engineering, they operate.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but it keeps speeding up and it's difficult.
I'm trying to make best use of everybody's time.
Okay, I understand. I'll try not to interrupt anymore. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate you stopping it, and don't hesitate to do it again, please.
Thank you.
We talked about the construction of new facilities that would occur between 2019 and 2030, and perfecting the beneficial uses that would occur from 2020 through 2060. These are completely consistent with Sigma and the planning horizons. And we need to keep moving, and we hope that this is a source of water available for recharge and for us meeting our beneficial uses and overcoming this critical overdraft that DWR has recognized since 1980. We do believe that the watershed award and reserves should be consistent with these timelines and interpreting that this is a set aside for developing the source of supply as we need it to meet the current and future beneficial uses. And as I mentioned, our demands have gone down through conservation. We're making all the right moves. And to kick the props out from under us on this water as a source for recharge, for wet year, dry year operations, which clearly is available in the types of hydrology. I want to make note that that RIME report showed this is above normal and wet year water. The concerns that keep getting voiced are in the normal, below normal, and dry years. It's important to note that the findings in that report showed that there was water available at times when it wouldn't impair, impact, or alter the operation of CVP or Folsom facilities. And when the analysis was done at that time, we had the draft flow management standards, which have been institutionalized obviously since then, and showed that there would not be impairment of existing rights or fisheries flows or temperature or any of that. I see a lot of misunderstanding in some of the policy statements with regard to the operational concepts that we're proposing to use either Freeport or some other mode of diversion to get the water into this county to meet our needs.
Hearing Officer Kinsey, I apologize for interrupting, but I want to know if it's appropriate to lodge an objection to testimony, written testimony, in the summary of testimony when it is actually being provided.
I am on mute. Yes, Mr. Kelly, this would be an appropriate time to lodge an objection.
Thank you, Hearing Officer Kunze. So the parties, the protestant parties and participating parties submitted a question to the hearing officer, and you responded by letter dated August 11th, 2021. And that dealt with, in part, the adequacy of the water availability analysis that was submitted in support of the application. I note that Mr. Zaidar just talked about the adequacy of that report, that analysis for the purposes of the state board, and also his testimony at paragraph 35, paragraph 59, and kind of scattered throughout the written testimony also talks about the water availability analysis, demonstrating that water is available and things like that. And that testimony both written and the way he just summarized it, is not consistent with your ruling in your August 11th letter. So I would just like to object to that testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Let me take a look at that. I mean, I'll tell you right now, my sense, this one's a little bit tricky because to the extent San Joaquin County is making the argument that they have completed a water availability analysis and it's adequate and that should be considered in terms of diligence, that I think would be relevant in this proceeding. To the extent the testimony is being presented as evidence that water is in fact available, I think that's outside of the scope of this proceeding. But when we take a break, and before we enter this testimony into evidence, I will take a look at it and we'll come back to this objection.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I won't talk about that anymore.
No, Mr. Zaidar, what you should do is plan to continue with your presentation as is, because the objection has not been sustained at this point. If we need to and it's inappropriate, we'll come back to that, but please continue your presentation. I apologize for the interruption and
no problem.
Please go ahead.
Next slide, please. Moving forward, we would look forward to receiving comments on the adequacy of the document we maintained was appropriate at the time. It wasn't really torn apart previously. We'd be happy to continue to work to remove those protests, as well as to develop inter and intra-regional partnerships that would not only help our area, but others that may seek to take advantage of the conjunctive use operations and groundwater banking types of programs we are espousing. We're going to continue to implement the GSP, develop that accounting framework and all of our funding and financing mechanisms, move forward to complete the DREAM pilot project and then seek to expand that and use the physical facilities that have continuously been espoused since the IRWM in the Integrated Conjunctive Use Program in 2014. Continue to build those partnerships. We would like to negotiate to say, what are the opportunities for all of us? And define the compliance approach that would meet the state board's need for discretionary action on the permit at a project level. And if we can do a combined program project for what we are moving forward for further consideration through the Groundwater Authority, JPA, we're going to continue to do so. And I believe that is my last slide.
Thank you, Mr. Zadar. At this time, I'd like to turn to cross-examination. I will start, as we discussed at our pre-hearing conference, I'll start with the other parties who are presenting cases in chief. Ms. Snyder with Freeport Regional Water Authority, do you have any questions for Mr. Zadar?
Just two brief questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Zadar, is it accurate to say that when San Joaquin County amended the, I think it was the third amendment to the application in 2007, that it knew it needed to negotiate for access to the Freeport diversion facility?
I'm sorry, once more.
I said, is it accurate to say that San Joaquin County knew back when it amended its application, I believe it was the third version in 2007, that it needed to negotiate for a right of access to the Freeport diversion?
Yes, and in our mind, we've been interacting with the party whose capacity we would contract for through things like the MOA, the PDA on the Protest Dismissal Agreement on the American and the Tuolumne River, and we feel those have been substantive negotiations and resulted in tangible actions like this DREAM project. So that's the capacity we need, and we just felt that other negotiations were not yet ripe for decision because they had to be made in context of our own local planning, and we felt that the evidence that had been produced showed that there would not be any harm through use of the available capacity shown in the Ryan report or the water availability analysis produced in 2012.
And Mr. Zadar, is there currently an agreement in place for access to the Freeport diversion?
No.
Thank you. I have no more questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. And just a reminder, and I appreciate the respect, but no need to call me Your Honor. Ms. Kinsey is just fine. Thank you. If I get promoted, I'll let you know.
Old habits die hard, so
I realize that. Mr. Ferguson, do you have any questions for Mr. Zadar?
Yes, I do have a few questions.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Zadar, in paragraph 45 of your testimony, you state that the DREAM project is intended to show how American or McCullough River water will be recharged and banked for basin beneficial use, correct?
Correct.
So in what way is the DREAM project intended to show how American River water could be recharged and banked for beneficial use?
It's showing the operational concepts and the use of physical facilities to get that water, wet year water, in the ground for dry year use.
So is there any documentation that the DREAM project was intended to show how American River water could be and banked for beneficial use?
Just as contained in the protest dismissal agreement that said we'd move forward to look at mutual opportunities for both American and Mobilizing River waters.
So it's your testimony that the protest dismissal agreement states that you would look at American River waters as potential sources for the DREAM project?
I believe so.
Madam Hearing Officer, is it okay if we could actually have Mr. Buckman chime in on some of these cross-exam responses?
At this point, let's wait. Going forward, we could, in the future, we could present your witnesses as a panel. We didn't do that here. And that would make these things easier. And maybe we want to do that on rebuttal. But since we haven't here, let's hold on that and we can have Mr. Buckman address these questions. What I do is I will allow, even if the questions aren't raised on cross, I will allow Mr. Buckman to address them through his, he can do it in his, if he wants to add to his summary of his written testimony. But I will say that this is appropriate within the scope. The questions asked of Mr. Zadar would be appropriately within the scope of issues that Mr. Buckman can testify to when he is testifying.
Thank you.
He represents much deeper legacy knowledge. As I say, I've been here 2 years, been working a little bit around the county on and off for 20, but his legacy knowledge is going to be much more dependable than my own.
Thank you. And go ahead, Mr. Ferguson, if you have more questions.
I do. So in paragraph 51 of your testimony, Mr. Zadar, you state that the American, McCullough, and Calaveras are sources of water available for recharge, correct?
That's been our presumption, yes.
So in what way is American River water a source of water available for recharge?
As documented in the Ryan report that showed both there is water as well as Freeport capacity. And then again, in the Wagner and Bonson year 2012, that shows wet year water is available to be put to use and to be stored, which is why we have a groundwater storage amendment in the fourth amended permit as well. Application, excuse me. I'm hopeful.
In paragraph 52 of your testimony, you state that application 29657 represents a key part of the long-term supply portfolio and water available for recharge under an expanded DREAM project. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So isn't it true that application 29657 is not mentioned in documentation for the DREAM project? In particular, San Joaquin County 5?
I would have to go back and look myself.
So you're not certain it's mentioned?
Not 100% sure.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I am not 100% certain.
Okay. So in paragraph 56 of your testimony, you state that the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Sustainability Plan has estimates that on average, the Eastern San Joaquin subbasin needs 80,000 acre feet per year of new yield to achieve sustainability, correct?
That's what it says, yes, sir.
So does the Eastern San Joaquin County GSP conclude the implementation of the identified planned and potential projects and management actions would essentially resolve the overdraft in the Eastern San Joaquin subbasin?
Yes, that's one of the intents of our project 20.
But project 20 is not a planned or potential action, correct? It's a long-term action, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so would the identified planned and potential projects yield enough offset of that overdraft to essentially resolve the overdraft condition?
I believe so, with the inclusion of the American River water.
Is that stated in the GSP?
I believe so. I mean, that's the intention. Like I say, there's been this continuity in the planning and the projects, the physical facilities and the operating concepts. Note that the other ones that are more ripe for decision include the North and South San Joaquin Water Conservation District projects that could also take water from the Mobilizing or the American. The DREAM project is the intent to expand those facilities or other facilities as were identified in that Freeport feasibility study prepared in 2011. So there's still a lot on the table. And again, the water that can go in those pipes and put to beneficial use could be, we've tried to keep mutuality there and give ourselves flexibility so we have the reliability by looking at both the American and the Mobilizing rivers.
Yeah, I want to stay focused on the Eastern San Joaquin GSP and your testimony related to that GSP. So just a couple more questions. The American River is not identified as a source of water supply for those planned or potential projects in the GSP, correct?
That is correct, but the presumption of all of our available sources is in there. And the intent is, yeah, we didn't think anybody was going to be trying to jerk it away from us. So we were saying we have water available for recharge as documented in prior reports.
With respect to project 20, the American River isn't identified as a source of water supply either, is it?
It is consistent and continuous in the presumption that the Freeport feasibility study and the Rhine reports were, call it incorporated by reference, but we assumed that no one would try to take away our access or application in that American River, maybe wrongfully so. Maybe we should have updated the water availability analysis. Maybe we should have documented more specifically the water available for recharge in that. But in the haste, say, to put together that GSP and the timeline and get it submitted by the January 2020, it may have been more Spartan than it should have been.
So given your testimony that the GSP's identified planned and potential projects would be able to resolve the overdraft conditions, and the plan doesn't mention American River water as a source of supply, doesn't that indicate that the American River water it isn't necessary to resolve the overdraft condition in the East?
No, it doesn't indicate that at all.
But if the GSP is not identifying it as a source and it's indicating that the projects identified would otherwise resolve the overdraft.
I would lean on that assumption and the incorporation by reference of all the prior work and the fact that we're tiering and building off of that integrated conjunctive use program, and the same physical facilities is mentioned in both Freeport and that integrated conjunctive use project. We presume the availability to continue.
Okay, thank you. I just have a few more questions related to protests. Are you familiar with the, Ms. Kinsey, do you mind? I do have some questions on behalf of GCID, if I could just ask those now.
GCID. Oh, yes.
We also represent them.
Please.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Ferguson.
So you're familiar with GCID's protest to the water rights application? Is that correct?
Not intimately familiar. There's been a large number of them. I can't say I have ownership or separation of all of them.
Okay. So has San Joaquin County attempted any protest negotiations with GCID?
I'm not aware of any.
Mr. Ferguson, did we lose you? let's wait just a few moments. I will put Ms. Schroeder, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. You'll be next up if Mr. Ferguson doesn't rejoin us shortly. Actually, what I'll do if Mr. Ferguson doesn't rejoin us shortly is we'll take a short break. I think we're about due for a break, and maybe he can address his technical difficulties.
Can I ask a question?
Ms. Galino, yes, certainly.
Is it appropriate or possible to get a copy of the PowerPoint or some exhibits, the exhibits?
Yes, absolutely. This is a good time to ask that question. What I will do is I believe we have your email address in our administrative record, and I can have my staff email to you access information to our FTP folder, and that folder includes all of the exhibits, including the PowerPoint presentations you're seeing today, all of the testimony of the witnesses, and will include, all those words and things that you might need to spell. So I will ask them to email you with that information. Thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Ferguson, are you with us? Have you rejoined us? With that, what I'd like to do is go ahead and take a 10-minute break. I apologize, Mr. Zadar, this is not usual. You're not off the hook. But let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. It is now 10:22. We'll return at 10:32, and hopefully at that point, Mr. Ferguson will be able to rejoin us. If not, then I will look to Ms. Schroeder and whether you have questions on behalf of CDFW. So I will see you all at 10:32 a.m.
Thank you.
All right, I show that it's 10:32. Ms. Galita, are you ready for us to go back on the record?
Sorry, yes, I am ready.
Great, thank you. Mr. Ferguson, I think I saw you. There you are.
Yes.
I'm happy you could rejoin us. We just took a brief break, which worked out just fine. I also, just before I hand things back over to you, I think I noted that Mr. Rubin may have joined us for Westland's Water District. Mr. Rubin, are you on the line? And would you please identify yourself just for the record if you are? He may have stepped out again. We'll bring him in at some point. All right. Mr. Zaidar, are you prepared to continue your cross-examination?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Ferguson, please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey, and I apologize for that. I just have a couple more questions. Mr. Zadar, are you familiar with the Sacramento County Water Agency's protest to the San Joaquin County water right application?
I know it exists.
So prior to July 1st, 2015, did San Joaquin County attempt any protest negotiations with the Sacramento County Water Agency?
I was not here. I'll defer that to Mr. Buckman when he does it, because he, like I said, he's kind of the legacy knowledge.
Okay, I can ask the question of him. Thank you. That's all the questions I have, Ms. Kinsey.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Ms. Schroeder, do you have any questions on behalf of CDFW?
Yes, I have one question. Thank you. Mr. Zadar, are you familiar with the San Joaquin County pre-hearing conference statement from July?
Mine?
It's a statement by the county, yeah.
Yes.
Great. In that statement, the county requests a 9-month continuance of this hearing to allow an updated water availability analysis to be prepared. Is it still the county's intention to prepare an updated water availability analysis?
Well, right now, at this point in time, until I get specific comments, I would say our water availability as stands is adequate. Without someone pointing out the inadequacies that are necessary, we expressed a willingness to do that. But I would want to do a scoping session on that to see where there are misunderstandings that maybe could be cleared up now rather than just creating more unnecessary work.
Thank you.
And if Hearing Officer Kinsey, this is Brian Polson on behalf of El Dorado Irrigation District. I just here again would like to raise a potential objection to the testimony that the availability analysis is adequate. I think what we're struggling with, at least I'm struggling with here, is that on the one hand, as you've identified in the order that Mr. Kelly pointed out, this hearing is not to decide whether or not the availability analysis is adequate to demonstrate availability of water. But there's quite a bit of uncertainty about whether or not that analysis is adequate to demonstrate diligence. And so I would like to object to the statement that water availability analysis was adequate.
Noted, Mr. Polson. Let me finish up and make sure we're complete with Ms. Schroeder, and then I'm going to turn back to this objection. Ms. Schroeder, were those all of your questions on cross-examination for Mr. Zaidar?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Ms. Kinsey.
Thank you. So we have the objection on registered with initially raised by Mr. Kelly, and now you've raised it, Mr. Polson. Would anyone else like to comment before I turn back to the county on this issue? Would anyone else like to comment on this particular objection? And then I'll hear from the county, and then I'll go ahead and rule on that objection. Are there any other comments?
Yes, Hearing Officer Kinsey West Miliband for the City of Sacramento. I'd like to join in the objections by Mr. Kelly and Mr. Polson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is Austin Cho for El Dorado Water Agency. I'd just also like to join Mr. Polson's objection.
Thank you.
And this is Jessica Schroeder for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. We would also like to join the objection.
Thank you.
Ms. Kinsey, Aaron Ferguson for Sacramento County Water Agency and Glen Close Irrigation District, and we join the objection as well.
Thank you very much.
And Ms. Kinsey, Chris Schutz, California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance, also like to join the objection.
Thank you.
Ms. Kinsey, Holly Jacobson for the City of Folsom, City of Roseville, Sacramento Suburban Water District, and Woodland Davis Water Agency, who would also like to join the objections.
Thank you.
Ms. Kinsey, Janelle Cradiger on behalf of San Juan Water District, we would also like to join the objections. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carissa Beecham for San Luis Delta Mendota Water Authority, we will also join the objection.
Thank you.
Kira Johnson for State Water Contractors and Kern County Water Agency, we also join the objections.
Ron Stark, Friends of the River, we would also like to join the objection.
Thank you. It is the thing to do. I don't mean to make light of it, but it does seem to be the thing to do. Is there anyone else who would care to join, for the record, purposes of the record, to join the?
Yes, Ms. Kinsey, Janice Snyder for the Freeport Regional Water Authority would also join the objection.
Thank you. I'll then turn to Ms. Brenner. Do you have any, would you like to make any comments before I rule on this particular objection? With respect to, as I understand the objection is as to testimony regarding the adequacy of the water availability analysis that has been conducted by the county to date.
Because the other thing that I would offer is that the on the hearing, the notice for the hearing does include some reference to the water availability analysis. There's a fine line there. We've been asked questions about the water availability analysis. Again, where's the fine line? We're starting with the notion that based on the current record for this application, there has been a water availability analysis submitted and no response to that analysis to date. So in order to respond to your issues, there has to be some discussion of that very fact. And that's what we're trying to do. And in response to these cross-examination questions, I understand that there's some fine line, and Mr. Zadar is just indicating that to date, we have submitted a WAA as required and have not heard formal objections to them. So I think that's very relevant evidence.
Thank you, Ms. Brenner. And I'll go ahead and rule on that objection, which is to overrule it in part. I think in accordance with what I previously stated, the question of the water availability analysis is relevant to some extent to the question of diligence on behalf of the county in pursuing this application. I reiterate my comments in the letter. Now I don't have the date in front of me, but the letter in which I clarified the scope of this hearing, which does not include the substantive question of the adequacy of the water availability analysis. If this application continues, there would be a later time in this process in which that issue would be taken up and considered by the board. So I'm going to leave in the testimony. There will be no striking it. Well, we haven't admitted it into evidence yet, but I'll overrule the objection with respect to the written testimony and the oral testimony, with the note that that testimony will be considered only with respect to the county's diligence and not with respect to the substantive question as to whether the water availability analysis is adequate to demonstrate that water is available to the application. So I'm going to leave that as is. Of course, these objections are noted for the record. We have them. And let's go ahead and move forward. I think with that, I'm going to turn to Mr. Stork and ask Mr. Stork whether you have any questions for Mr. Zaidar at this time.
I do not.
Thank you. I'll now turn to the remaining parties. I think we've already checked off Glen Close Irrigation District. I'll just go down the list. El Dorado Water Agency, do you have any questions for Mr. Zaidar?
I do not, Ms. Kinsey.
El Dorado Irrigation District?
No questions.
San Juan Water District?
No questions. Thank you, Ms. Kinsey.
Thank you. Placer County Water Agency?
I do have a couple of questions, and I'm going to try to be careful given the hearing officer's ruling on the objections. But yeah, I'd like to follow up with a couple of questions.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Zidar, good morning. Dan Kelly with Placer County Water Agency. I just have a couple questions. Do you have your written testimony available in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you could take a look on page 9 at paragraph 35. When you testify there that there was a water availability analysis submitted in March 2012, and the last clause of your testimony says, which was accepted by the state board. I'd like to know what you meant there by accepted by the state board.
It's in the record.
Okay, but so you're not intending there to suggest that the state board accepted it as adequate for any purpose, are you?
With lack of any comment back, I would assume that they did. Maybe a bad assumption, but there was no comment back one way or the other of it regarding its acceptability that I am aware of.
Okay, and Mr. Zidar, if somebody had presented evidence at this portion of the proceeding that, for example, the demand estimates contained in that water availability analysis were grossly underestimated, would that change your testimony?
I would have to look at it. I don't have it as fingertip knowledge.
I would also object. That's a hypothetical question.
I'll overrule the objection because I think the answer here dealt with that hypothetical very neatly, which is that apparently he doesn't have enough information to answer that question. Mr. Kelly, do you have more questions for Mr. Zidar? You may be thinking, oh, there you are. I just didn't have you on the screen.
No, I apologize. I'm just looking at some other provisions of his paragraph, and hearing Officer Kinsey, the reason I'm struggling, and I appreciate the ruling, is that there's a comment that there were no comments and no objections to it to date, but a lot of the parties were going to present objections and evidence to the contrary as part of this part of the proceeding, and we were told to not do that. And so I'm sort of struggling with the fact that we have that testimony in the record now, that nobody has raised any issues with it, but we were told to not do that. And so I just want to make sure, I guess, the record's clear that had Placer County Water Agency been provided the opportunity to present evidence about deficiencies in that water availability analysis, that we would have done so. And with that, for the record, I have no further questions.
Mr. Kelly, I'll say I think that's fair for the record. I also say you can assume some understanding of the water rights, and I don't mean this to be glib, but I guess some understanding of the water rights process by the state board on my behalf, and how these processes go and how they do take time, and there is a back and forth, and the fact that a submission of the document, even in 2012, sometimes these things aren't acted upon promptly, and there are different opportunities for comment. So that's a complicated way of saying, as I understand this is complicated. I understand the history and the record of this proceeding and this application, and the parties who have participated to date, and the outstanding protests. So I will note that as well. So I appreciate your comments, and I think I understand where you're coming from. And with that, do you have any further questions?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rubin for Westlands Water District, have you joined us, and do you have any questions?
Yes, good morning. This is John Rubin with Westlands. I do apologize for joining late. I was able to join the hearing at approximately 10:20 this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. It's nice to have you. I don't know if you maybe heard some of the testimony of Mr. Zidar. Do you have any questions for him about his oral or written testimony at this time?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority, Ms. Aykroyd, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. State Water Contractors and Kern County Water Agency.
I do not have any questions.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Schutz with CSPA.
Yes, I have some questions for Mr. Zidar.
Great. Go ahead, Mr. Schutz.
Good morning, Mr. Zidar. I'd like to start with a general factual question. How soon does the county anticipate it will begin construction of works specific to application 29657?
I don't have a date.
And it would be helpful if you have your testimony available as I go through these. I'm looking at your testimony at paragraph 3, where you discuss what you call foundational planning efforts to put water from application 29657 to use. You discuss a programmatic EIR there, correct?
That's correct.
Is it your testimony that programmatic analysis is sufficient demonstration of diligence to warrant indefinite allowance of time to complete a water rights application?
In part.
So are there any bounds on the amount of time that a programmatic analysis should suffice as diligence? Is there any specific time period that you feel is appropriate to before more specific actions are taken, not programmatic?
I would say it's an excellent place to start to further scope such more detailed analysis at project level. It's certainly something we could build on. Whether or not it's stale and could be tiered off of as such, I would leave that to legal counsel to make some determinations.
So you don't have a particular time period that you think is appropriate?
No.
In paragraph 11, you discuss progress in evaluating facilities for the application. Has the county secured contracts for the use of those facilities?
Which facilities are we speaking of, sir?
All the different facilities that you're speaking of, specifically the Freeport regional facilities, East Bay MUDS facilities, and North San Joaquin Water Conservation District's facilities. You refer to all of those in paragraph 11 of your testimony.
We have not on the Freeport with North San Joaquin. We're partners through the JPA, and we've helped them seek water smart monies and the Prop 68 grant funding, both of which we have not been successful at getting. But we do not have a specific contract. The dream,
right, no.
other than the Dream Project, you didn't reference the Dream Project, but that is a whole bunch of us as partners on that investigation.
Referring now to paragraph 12, you say that other projects were less costly per unit of yield. Which projects are you referring to?
All those ones listed so far where there has been cost evaluations.
And what are the unit costs of each of those projects?
I don't have that fingertip knowledge, sir.
And do you have a current estimated unit cost for water under application 29657?
Only as has been evaluated in the prior feasibility study, but have not seen those brought up to date. And I don't have that specific fingertip knowledge either.
And do you have a number associated with that previous study?
No, I do not.
Looking now at paragraph 26, you discuss and I'm going to try to be careful here, but it's a different question regarding the water availability analysis that I do believe is germane to diligence. In paragraph 26, you discuss the uncertain reliability of water, and you say, given the drought, regulatory shortages due to delta flow, salinity, water quality, and fishery requirements, and climate change. Does your most recent water availability analysis for application 29657 assume reduced water availability due to these factors? Or does it assume existing constraints at the time it was developed and historical hydrology?
I believe it's just existing.
Okay.
including the flow management standards and the Delta water quality protection requirements as they were known at the time that was modeled.
Okay. In paragraph 28, you discuss water rights application 29835. That application is also submitted by the county as Exhibit 10, is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
The application for water rights application 29835 is submitted by the county in this proceeding as Exhibit S San Joaquin County 10. Isn't that correct?
I believe so. Yes, as footnoted there.
Yes. And that application has been pending also since 1990. Isn't that correct?
Your point being? Is that a question or a statement?
It's a question.
Could you repeat it, please?
Has application 29835 been pending since 1990?
If that's the date of submittal, yes.
Isn't it true that the facilities you propose to divert water under application 29657 are the same facilities you propose to use under application 29835?
We have tried to design for the mutuality of multiple sources of water, including the American River and the Wesleyan.
Is application 29835 one of the less costly projects you referred to in paragraph 12 of your testimony?
I believe so, yes.
Do you know what the unit cost of water under application 29835 would be?
Well, we're in a feasibility study and reconnaissance of a lot of those, so I don't have the fingertip number there for you.
To your knowledge, what is the current timeline for the county to complete the steps it must take for the water board to rule on application 29835?
I would object that that application is not an issue in this particular hearing.
In response, I would say it was introduced by the county as an exhibit. The county has referred, and this witness has referred in his testimony to more cost-effective projects. This he has identified as a more cost-effective project. I'm getting to the sequencing of the various projects that the county has contemplated and what the most likely sequence is. It goes to the amount of time it will take application 29657 to be acted on.
Stand with my objection. The question is not relevant to this proceeding.
I'm actually going to sustain this objection. This is my thinking, is that the timing of 29835 going forward, I don't think here is relevant to the diligence that the county has exercised in the past on this application. I'm going to get the number wrong. 29657. 29. It's on the front of my paper. Let me get this right for the record, since we now have two applications. All right, we're talking about 29657 and the diligence with respect to that application. I'm not seeing the relevance of the future plans on 29835 going forward. I do recognize that the county introduced this as an exhibit, the application itself as an exhibit. So, Mr. Schutz, I'm not going to disallow any line of questioning on 29835, but if you can focus on how this relates to the past efforts of the county with respect to 29657, instead of looking forward, looking into the past, I think that would be appropriate. Do you care to rephrase a question or move on with this line of questioning?
I think I'll just, I think I'll pass on this line of questioning. It goes to sequencing. And my question has to do with whether, so let me try this and see if this passes muster. Does the county plan to complete application 29835 prior to completing application 29657.
I continue my objection.
Let me see if I can rephrase that, because it's a good, there's a question here that I'd like answered. Mr. Zaidar, can you summarize for me the current status and efforts, in short, on application of the county in pursuing application 29835? And the next question I'm going to ask you is in comparison to the status of the county's efforts on 29657.
I'm not sure I get your question.
The first question is, what is the status of application 29835?
It's in context of the GSP implementation dialogues as we move into both the funding and financing and the basic accounting framework, get resolution of the institutional mechanisms we would use to perfect either of those. And the implementation of DREAM, the expansion and implementation of the DREAM project.
Would you say that the current status of application 29835 is more advanced towards obtaining a permit from the State Water Board? I know there's a lot of factors there, but is it more advanced in that movement? Do you expect, or let me start again. I can ask it this way. Is there has a specific project specific EIR been completed for application 29835?
No.
And have protests lodged by any protests that have been lodged against the application, have those been resolved?
East Bay Mud.
Understood. So this application is specifically referenced in the protest dismissal agreement?
That's correct.
Thank you. That's helpful. I think that's as far as I think is on this line of questioning that I think is productive. Although, Mr. Schutz, I will turn to you. If there is more to this, you're welcome to give it a shot. But I'm wondering if we should move along from here.
A more general question: if water were available under application 29835, would that be pursued in preference because of its cost effectiveness to water under application 29657?
Those decisions are not mine to make. They're certainly to be made by the GWA and the partnerships to be established.
Okay.
Maybe I can jump in and ask another question. I know I get my prerogative to ask questions later, but let me ask another one on that point. Is it fair to say, Mr. Zaidar, that a decision as to whether to move forward on application 29835, either in preference to, in conjunction with, or at the same time as application 29657 has not been made at this time? So
that's correct. And it certainly would be influenced by the decisions that are going to be made here.
Thank you. Mr. Schutz, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, and thank you for your assistance. Mr. Zadar, excuse me, turning to paragraph 55, is it your testimony that what you call chronic and systemic groundwater overdraft is good cause to permit delay of pursuing a water rights application?
I'd say it's a reason to pursue it. I'm not sure I'm getting what you're asking. Try that again.
What I'm asking is not whether it's the reason for pursuing it. What I'm asking is whether it is grounds for delay in pursuing it.
Again, I'm not sure I get your question.
Does the extent of the need justify delay? of a pursuit of a water rights application.
I believe that's what I'm saying in the testimony.
Thank you. Referring to paragraph 56 and the stated overdraft of 80,000 acre feet per year in the eastern San Joaquin groundwater basin, what pattern and rate of diversion does the county anticipate it would need to deploy to use application 29657 or other sources to backfill the overdraft?
Well, it really depends on the hydrology and what water is available from what source, the frequency with which it is available, and the conditions, the hydrologic conditions for that year. There's high variability in the answer to that question.
What I'm getting to is what size diversion facilities and rates of diversion does the county anticipate it would need to construct in order to backfill the overdraft?
That's the basis of design for any pipeline diversion or recharge facilities drive that.
And do you have an answer today as to what the rate of diversion would need to be and what the size of facilities would need to be in order to achieve your stated goal?
Other than the specifics that are shown in that Freeport feasibility study and the RIME document that said, here's the hydrology in relation to the existing 155 CFS diversion capacity, no, I don't. But that is very detailed in those documents.
All right, thank you. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schutz. At this point, I'm going to turn to my own team here and ask Mr. Anderson, do you have any questions that you would like to ask at this time?
Ms. Kenzie, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Wes Miliband for the city of Sacramento. So I'm following your invitation to jump in.
That's right. Yes, please.
Well, thank you. I just have a couple of brief questions. They're more clarifying type questions based on the testimony and part of what came out just through cross-examination. So good morning, Mr. Zidar. I'm Wes Miliband for the city of Sacramento. From putting aside the water availability analysis topic, what has the county done since filing this application as it relates to evaluating the impacts or potential impacts to Folsom Reservoir storage?
Nothing beyond what has been done previously.
Okay, and similar question as it relates to evaluating impacts or potential impacts to Lower American River fisheries and habitat.
Nothing in addition to the substance that's already out there and in the record.
And then final, similar, same question would be, what has the county done as it relates to impacts, potential impacts to American River water users?
Same answer.
Okay. And then you also expressed a willingness with regard to the water availability analysis to have a scoping session with parties, protestants, et cetera. So my question is, have either you yourself or anyone else from the county made any kind of effort to reach out with parties or protestants to have that discussion?
Yes, we did.
And whom specifically?
We talked to EID and El Dorado County Water Agency, and who else? We had some phone calls. We had a phone call to say, what would it look like to update that? And, how long would it take? And what were your thoughts?
And what as it relates to my client, the city of Sacramento, has any effort been made to have contact to have a similar discussion?
No.
And do you have a reason for that lack of action at this point?
It's a very long phone list, Wes, and we were trying to find a way to maybe formalize those dialogues, and we never did get there.
Okay, well, I appreciate the time and the responses. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Milban. I will also turn to Mr. Soderlund, who also was not on my list. Mr. Soderlund, do you have any questions at this time?
Thank you for remembering me. And no, I do not have any questions.
Thank you. Now I will turn back to my team. Mr. Anderson, do you have any questions that you would like to ask?
I do not have any questions.
Thank you. I have, I believe, one question. That hasn't, I had other questions, but they've been answered at this point. I'm looking at your your written testimony, Mr. Zadar. And you also had a slide about this, about the planning horizon. So this is paragraph 74 of your written testimony. You noted here that the project schedule that accompanied the fourth amended application for 29657 noted that construction of new facilities would occur between 2019 and 2030. And that this is consistent with Sigma, et cetera, et cetera. And I just wondered if you would clarify for me whether the county, you think the county is in a position at this point with the efforts that have been completed to actually construct these facilities by 2030.
We haven't put together a production schedule. Things are at various levels of design, permitting, and environmental clearance. And a lot of it ties back to funding and financing, the discussions that we're really dropping into in terms of how these projects move forward. But we are obliged to do annual reports and a 5-year update in that GSP. So that would be the process with which those would come together over the next cycle of review. And we're certainly still awaiting Edith's comments on the GSP.
So I just want, well, maybe I'm misunderstanding. I understood this to be specific to application 29657. And I thought that was fairly, it's pretty aggressive, right? To have I would think a project specific EIR done and presumably have this permit wrapped up and completed and have construction done by 2030. Can you clarify, is that not what you're suggesting here? I just want to make sure I understand this testimony at paragraph 7.
We were trying to conceive of what a CEQA and review process would be going forward to meet the needs both of the lead agencies here in terms of projects and the rightness for decision, whether it's programmatic or project on these things, knowing that we would really need to get into the specific level of detail on the diversions, the water rights, and the water availability analysis for purposes of the state board's decision, and be prepared to talk about what the scope of that analysis would be for your lead agency requirements versus our lead agency requirements on implementation of projects. So we don't have a preferred strategy at this point. That's what I would hope to see out of scoping.
So when you talk about construction of new facilities in paragraph 74, you're not talking about any specific new facilities. It's new facilities of some kind that are encompassed within, that are discussed in your GSP.
Well, again, they're all in various stages, like north-south system improvement, south system improvement are moving forward, have reviews completed, and are seeking to get support for funding the implementation. We're chasing grants, and they're looking at how the local revenues are going to be generated.
Let me try this a different way. Why did you include paragraph 74 in your testimony? What are you trying to say to me? I'm not understanding.
I say that there is a broad horizon with which to move this forward to decision, and it was a longer range thing consistent with what we believe would be watershed of origin and a reserve and some timeline to make this happen. And I appreciate the push that the state board gives us to focus the mind and make things move faster than might happen otherwise.
I think I understand. Okay. Those are all the questions that I had. At this point, Ms. Brenner, do you have any redirect that you care to conduct of your witness, or should we move forward?
Based on the conversation with the witness during the break, I think that Mr. Buckman will be able to provide redirect for this set of cross-exam questions.
Okay, thank you. That's appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Zadar. I appreciate you joining us today. And depending when we get to rebuttal, we may hear from you again, but thank you very much. I think you're off the hook at this point. Ms. Brenner, shall we turn to Mr. Buckman? Is he prepared to take the hot seat, so to speak?
Yes, please. I think we can turn to Mr. Buckman now.
Good morning. I'm Fritz Buckman with San Joaquin County Public Works, and I'll be summarizing my written testimony regarding our county's SGMA compliance efforts.
And let me pause. Hold up, Mr. Buckman, if you would, please. I do have to administer the oath.
Sorry.
And you jumped ahead of me just because I was still scanning my screens. It's a little slow on Zoom. I have to figure out wherever. It's easier in a room. I know who's talking to me.
Okay.
So at this point, let me go ahead and administer the oath. If you would please raise your right hand. Mr. Buckman, do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. And should I ask Ms. Mullen to pull up is it the same slide presentation, exhibit 14?
No, I haven't prepared PowerPoint.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then you may go ahead, Mr. Buckman.
Thank you. Again, I'm Fritz Buckman with San Joaquin County Public Works Department, and I'll be summarizing my written testimony regarding our county's SGMA compliance efforts, how these efforts relate to the development of and highlight the need for application 29657. The Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Authority, or GWA, as we've discussed previously, was formed in 2017 after approximately 2 years of discussions between 23 stakeholder agencies. And it was formed to oversee SGMA compliance efforts, including development of groundwater sustainability plan, or GSP, for the critically overdrafted Eastern San Joaquin subbasin. The GWA is essentially the successor to the Groundwater Basin Authority, which commissioned development of the 2007 and 2014 integrated water management plans, the Freeport feasibility study, and the integrated conjunctive use program for the Eastern San Joaquin subbasin. More than $5 million has been expended on our SGMA compliance efforts from 2014 to date. The GSP planning and development process, including preparing groundwater basin characterization and preparing a groundwater basin model, which are elements of the work plan set forth by the county in the 4th amended application 29657. With support from DWR, a grant from DWR, county's with distress basin grant, the county completed development of a hydrogeologic conceptual model for the subbasin in 2017. Chapter 2 of the GSP includes a detailed groundwater basin characterization, which documented the hydrogeologic conceptual model, current and historical groundwater conditions, and the water budget produced from the model. The cornerstone of the GSP is to implement projects that increase use of surface water to offset groundwater pumping and or recharge groundwater to eliminate the pardon me? Oh, okay. To eliminate the estimated 80,000 acre-foot annual net groundwater overdraft and result in sustainable groundwater use in the subbasin by 2040. Projects identified in the GSP were prioritized based on a number of factors, including technical and regulatory complexity, likelihood of public acceptance, affordability and cost effectiveness, and minimizing environmental impacts. 3 tiers of projects were identified in the GSP. Planned projects, which are intended to be delivered during the 20-year GSP planning horizon, and are expected to eliminate the current overdraft when implemented. Potential and longer-term conceptual projects were also included in the GSP to address the possibility that the planned projects may deliver less than expected water supply benefits, uncertainty in groundwater model assumptions, and risk to current water supplies due to climate change and or regulatory requirements such as the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. Though moving the diversion point to Freeport has caused the American River water to be more expensive than other currently available options, this water is still needed to address the aforementioned water supply and SGMA compliance risks. Access to the American River supply needs to be retained by San Joaquin County interests to ensure long-term solutions are available. American River water from application 29657 is a potential water source for a number of projects identified in the GSP. I count no fewer than 6. San Joaquin Water Conservation District South System modernization, North San Joaquin Water Conservation District South System banking with East Bay Mud, North San Joaquin Water Conservation District North System modernization, the Manicero Recharge Project, the Tecklenburg Recharge Project, and project number 20, which we have called the Mobilizing Recharge Opportunities Project. And basically, this project was proposed by the county and was intended to use American River water as one of a number of potential sources as part of a regional integrated conjunctive use program as defined in the 2007 and 2014 IRWMPs, and is further studied under the Freeport feasibility study. The operating concepts are being further tested through the DREAM pilot groundwater banking project, and the GSP Project 20 and post-DREAM projects would include the alternative G2 projects and the Freeport alternative R1B projects identified in the Freeport feasibility study and referenced in the 4th amended application. That concludes my presentation at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buckman. At this point, I will turn to Freeport Regional Water Authority. Do you have any questions for Mr. Buckman?
No, Your Honor. No, Ms. Kinsey. I reserve the right potentially if after other cross-examination, if I might be allowed to do it at a later time.
Sure, noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferguson, do you have questions on behalf of either Sacramento County Water Agency or Glen Calusa Irrigation District?
Yes, I do, Ms. Kinsey.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Buckman.
Morning.
In paragraph 9 of your testimony, you state that the option to use the American River has never been expressly removed from consideration during the GSP development process, correct?
That's correct.
So are there any GSP documents that expressly identify the American River as a supply source for the GSP projects?
No, not to my knowledge. I don't believe we discussed sources for any of the projects, to my recollection.
Thank you. In paragraph 11 of your testimony, you state that should the State Water Board cancel the 4th amended application, it will remove this source from any further consideration in a solution mix that could be implemented to comply with SGMA, correct?
I'm trying to find it. Paragraph 11, last sentence. Correct. I think the intent there was that if this application is canceled, we would lose the watershed of origin designation if we were to reapply later.
So are there any institutional limitations within San Joaquin County that you're aware of that would prevent the county from filing a new water right application if the GSA makes the decision that an American River water supply is necessary to ensure sustainability?
No, other than it would be quite expensive.
Thank you. So I'm going to come back to the question I asked Mr. Zadar about Sacramento County Water Agency's protest, okay? And I will restate the question. Are you familiar with the Sacramento County Water Agency's protests, Mr. Buckman?
I am generally, I'm aware of it, and I'm aware of the protest and maybe a little bit of the content.
Okay. So are you aware of whether San Joaquin County attempted any protest negotiations with the Sacramento County Water Agency prior to July 1st, 2015?
Yes, I have a record in the letter that there was a meeting in 2013, and I believe there was at least one, perhaps two meetings, I believe in 2014, maybe in early 2015 as well. And those
And you,
meetings, the 2013 meeting, I was not a part of, I don't believe, but the later meeting involved San Joaquin County representatives, representatives from FREWA, Sac County Water Agency, and Sac County Water Agency County.
so what were the subjects discussed during those meetings?
Access to the facility. At one point, I think at one of the later meetings, potential costs for buy-in were shared and discussed, and a couple of different approaches how we might get there.
Would you be able to identify the dates of those meetings?
I would have to go research the archive of my calendar to see if I can pull those up, but potentially.
Okay.
I can tell you the participants, at least the first meeting I was at.
And that was the meeting in 2013, you're saying?
No, that was the meeting I was not at. I don't believe.
Okay, so the meeting, what were the other meetings? You said 2014 and
I believe late 2014 and perhaps early 2015. I think there were two after we amended the application.
Yeah, so who participated in those meetings?
Forrest Williams from FREWA, Sac County Water Agency / FREWA. I believe Michael Peterson, who's currently the director of SCWA, and Sandy Dunn, who was counsel for SCWA at the time. And I believe she was only at one meeting. I think she might have been only at the second meeting we had with them after 2014.
Okay, those are the only questions I have.
As I cover later in my rebuttal testimony, for several reasons, we suspended those discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Buckman. Those are the only questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Ms. Schroeder, do you have questions by CDFW?
No questions. Thank you, Ms. Kinsey.
Thank you. Mr. Stork, do you have any questions?
I think I have one.
Go ahead.
Can you explain how filing a new water right application is somehow or another precluded by the area of origin watershed protection statutes, which at least is my understanding, assuming that you're eligible, preserve, well, don't have a diligence requirement. Let's put it that way.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear everything you said.
I'm sorry. I'll try and speak up. You just testified saying that if this application is canceled for diligence or other reasons, and San Joaquin County, when it's ready to move forward on a project, files for a new water right application, how is that application precluded by the watershed protection statutes? In other words, how you're claiming that you have an area of origin claim essentially superior to reclamation. We can go into the arcane details of whether or not that's a appropriate characterization, but at least I think the county is presuming that this application is done under the watershed protection statutes. And I'm just trying to probe how an application that has a fresh date, a date that is coincident with an actual project, how that could not be an area of origin application.
I'm not an expert in this area. I'll defer to council, but my understanding is the current application is under a watershed of origin statute, and I understand that to be different than area of origin. And at the very least, we're certainly going to lose a significant amount of priority.
I'm sorry, I missed the last.
At the very least, if this application is canceled and we have to, refile at some point, in addition to the pretty significant expense, we're going to lose a significant amount of priority as well.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you, Mr. Stork. I will now go ahead and move through my list. El Dorado Water Agency, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. El Dorado Irrigation District.
No questions. Thank you.
San Juan Water District.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Placer County Water Agency.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Westlands Water District. San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I remember now, so I'm sliding you in here. City of Sacramento, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. State Water Contractors and Kern County Water Agency.
No questions.
Mr. Soderlin with DWR.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Schutz with CSPA. Do you have any questions?
I do have some questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Buckman. I thought this was going to be afternoon, but this is moving right along. In paragraph 7 of your testimony, you state criteria for prioritizing groundwater water supply projects. Isn't it true that under these criteria, application 29657 is not a high priority project for the county?
I would say, some of the factors, including cost, would tend to make it a lower priority, but I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as not a high priority. The priority is relative here.
Thank you. Referring to the prioritization criteria, isn't application 29657 technically complex?
It is.
Isn't application 29657 complex from a regulatory perspective?
It is.
Looking down at the first few sentences of paragraph 8 for a moment, you state that American River water delivered through Freeport is not cost effective. Isn't that correct?
Relative to other currently available sources, that's correct.
Thank you. Can you tell us what the unit cost in dollars per acre foot the county currently estimates would be for water delivered through the Freeport facilities?
Yeah, these numbers are planning level and a bit dated, but my understanding is that per acre foot cost is about $450 to $750.
$450 to $750 per acre foot. Can you explain that wide range of variability?
I think there's a lot of alternatives still, available, and it's planning level. There's a lot of uncertainty at this point.
Okay.
The cost of buying the Freeport is a huge variable potentially. So that, depending on what that looks like, that could cause a wide range in cost.
Okay. Going back to paragraph 7, you discuss what you call planned projects to be completed and online by 2040. Is water delivered under application 29657 one of the planned projects?
No, I don't believe any of the planned projects make use of 29657 water. There are a number of long-term and potential projects that could.
So
Some of those
the potential projects you also list in the next bullet, that would include water put to use under application 29657. Is that correct?
Yes, there are a number of projects covered under the categories in the next two bullets that could be served by American River Water.
Now, would it be a potential project, as you call it, or a longer term or conceptual project, or both?
I'm not sure I follow the question.
In your bullets here, you identify potential projects in one bullet and longer term and conceptual projects in the following bullet.
Right.
Which category would water put to use under application 29657 fall?
I would have to look, but I think both. I know there's at least one in the conceptual, but I'd have to go through the project list.
Okay,
But I believe it would be both.
thank you. One of the criteria for potential projects is funding, correct?
Correct.
Is there any funding currently available to the county to implement application 29657?
We do have planning money available through the county flood control district zone 2. We have very limited resources currently available there. But we do have a letter of intent that's been signed by county and the other contractors, as Dr. Lytle presented in his policy statement. So our three agencies are looking to put together an agreement to fund the development of the application.
So the funding
as part of the groundwater these actions. Go ahead.
So the funding you have available is funding for planning, is that correct?
Currently, yes.
Thank you. Looking at paragraph 9 of your testimony, you talk about the facilities of North San Joaquin Water Conservation District that could be used to divert water under application 29657. What is the current capacity in CFS of those North San Joaquin facilities?
Where in the testimony are you referring to?
Number 9. The projects proposed in the GSP include facilities North San Joaquin Water Conservation District, North and South Improvement Projects. That's what I'm asking about, those facilities there.
I can't give you a number, but the current capacity of those systems is quite limited. That's why they're looking to modernize and rehabilitate both of them.
And do you have a planned diversion capacity amount for those facilities?
I'm not sure. I imagine the Freeport Feasibility study may speak to some of that, but I don't have those numbers off the top of my head.
Thank you. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schutz. Mr. Anderson, do you have any questions that you would like to ask Mr. Buckman?
No questions. Thank you.
And I also don't have any questions. Ms. Brenner, do you have any items on redirect based on the cross-examination either of Mr. Zadar or Mr. Buckman?
I think that we'll line some of these issues up in our test.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. Can you start over, please?
Sure. I said, no, I believe we can wrap up some of these issues by our rebuttal testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, what I'd like to do, and thank you, Mr. Buckman. I appreciate you appearing today and your testimony today. At this point, Ms. Brenner, would you like to move San Joaquin County's exhibits into evidence?
I would. I was about to go there.
And are there any objections to the acceptance of San Joaquin County Exhibits 1 through 15 into evidence? Hearing none, San Joaquin County Exhibits 1 through 15 are accepted into evidence in this proceeding. It is now, what time is it? 11:38. I think it makes sense as a breaking point for lunch. It's a little early, but that's fine. I think it makes sense to take a break for lunch. But before we do, I want to talk to Ms. Snyder, which I believe you have 2 witnesses, as I understand. I wanted to ask you, do you think it makes sense to present your witnesses as a panel? And what I mean by that is that we would conduct cross-examination. Each of your witnesses would have a chance to present their summary of testimony, and then cross-examination would be conducted of both witnesses at the same time, which may allow us to move forward more quickly. And I thought their testimony at least appeared to be pretty significantly related. Do you think that makes sense, Ms. Snyder, to do it that way?
Yes, I do.
And are there any objections from any of the other parties to cross-examining the next 2 witnesses, which would be Mr. Briggs and Mr. Williams, as a panel?
No objection.
Thank you, Ms.
Count.
So let's go ahead and plan to do that. It is 11:39. Let's reconvene at, let's say, 12:45 p.m. and we will start with Freeport Regional Water Authority's witnesses. So we will now break for lunch until 12:45. Thank you. Oh, one note, I need to remember, because of our technology and the way our AHO YouTube broadcast goes, all of you will need to actually log out of the Zoom call and then log back in. So when we break for lunch, if you would please log out of the Zoom and then log back in when you're ready a few minutes before 12:45. That will make sure that we're all working together and we're able to live stream the second half of our day. Thank you very much. I will see you at 12:45.
Thank you.
Thank you.